the worst prediction I ever made that was close to the best. So here's a prediction I got 100% wrong, but it turns out it was so close to being an amazing right prediction. It has to do with my prediction that even though Putin had amassed a war machine on the border of Ukraine, I said until the day they crossed the border, I said he wasn't going to do it. Now that looks pretty stupid by today's perspective, right? I mean, everybody else said, everybody said he's obviously going to attack. He's got his army on the border, and then he attacked, just like you do when you put your army on the border. So boy, egg on my face, right? Stupid Scott. Got that one so wrong. How could I get that so wrong? So today we find out, or yesterday, RFK Jr. was tweeting about it, that in March of 2022, before the invasion, Israel's Prime Minister Bennett went to Moscow to work out a deal, and he made a deal to avoid the war. So he made a deal that Zelensky and Putin were both willing to accept to end the war. And in broad strokes, it looked like Zelensky would agree to not join NATO. Putin would agree to not murder Zelensky. They would have some stability about where the current border was. I guess Crimea would go to Russia. And basically they had a deal. So I was this close to having one of the most amazing predictions, because I said it wasn't going to happen. And it turns out that neither Zelensky nor Putin wanted it to happen, even when the army was on the border. Neither of them wanted it. And they both had a deal to avoid it. Do you know how the deal got ruined? Because the United States and maybe some other countries, at least Great Britain, decided they wanted the war more than they wanted the peace. They actually wanted the war. They wanted the war to degrade Russia's capabilities. And one of the U.S. generals said that directly. I forget which one. Said it directly. You know, the war is good because it degrades Russia. So I was so close to getting that right, but what I did not anticipate is that there would be legitimate countries with seemingly legitimate countries that wanted war for the benefit of the war. The benefit of the war. Like, those words shouldn't even go together. The benefit of a war. Like, it's just like crazy talk. And this sounds like it's pretty well documented. Now, here's what I tweeted to be provocative, but useful. In my opinion, that's a war that Trump would have avoided. Who disagrees? Trump would have avoided that war because he didn't want a war. Apparently, the United States wanted a war. Our government wanted a war. He didn't want one. Do you think he could have stopped it? I say yes. All right, here's a second question. Do you think that any of the GOP candidates who are currently running, any of them, do you think that any of them would have allowed that war to happen? Any of them? I say no. I say there's not one Republican candidate who would have allowed that war to happen, and we had the power to stop it. We did have the power to stop it. That seems to be in evidence. Now I'm going to make it even more provocative. You ready? I'm going to take it one level further. Almost any Democratic president could have stopped that war. RFK Jr. could have stopped it. Almost anybody that you can imagine who was running for president could have stopped the war simply by not wanting it. That's all it took. All it took was not wanting it. That's it. There were no other obstacles. You just had to say, I don't want a war, and then agree to the deal that Zelensky and Putin looked like they were agreeing to. That's all it took. And we couldn't get it done. Now, you ready for the next level of provocation? All right, I told you Trump could have avoided that war. I told you any Republican could have avoided the war. And I told you just about any Democrat probably would have avoided that war. Do you know what the conclusion is? Do you know what the conclusion is? That during that time, we did not have a president. That's the only logical conclusion. Because any functioning president of the United States would have easily stopped the war. Just hold that in your head for a moment. Any president of the United States would have stopped that war. We didn't have one. We actually didn't have a president. I feel like that's an evidence now that we didn't have a president, which would indicate we don't have one now. Right? In other words, Biden he didn't have the faculties to be a real president. We acted exactly like we didn't have a president. Am I wrong? I'm looking at your comments to see if there's any pushback. We acted exactly like we didn't have a president. We didn't have a commander-in-chief. There just wasn't one. Because the military-industrial complex apparently got everything they wanted. And that's not what happens when you have an actual president. Unless the president's so deeply in their pockets, of course. Yeah.